All right, we're back with another episode of Realty Resilience, and I'm your host, Dave Nations, and I'm really excited about our podcast today. We've got a returning guest, Chris Lance, who's also a fellow team member of our real estate team, Nations Network Real Estate Advisors. And Chris is our team's real estate investor expert, I should say, not expertise. And he has been working exclusively with investors, well, mostly exclusively with investors for what, 4 years now?
Yeah, about 4.5 now, yeah.
Okay. So the goal on our podcast today in this episode is really to dive in all things investing. When this podcast releases at the end of November, it'll be right before the end of the year. And there's still time to go out and buy and invest in real estate and take advantage of the benefits that you get with real estate investing. And those are some of the things I'd love to talk to Chris about today. So let's go ahead and jump in. If you want to, again, brief background on what you've been doing and share with the audience what your expertise in the real estate field is, and maybe a little bit before you got into real estate. I know you've been on the podcast before, but for those that didn't hear your first episode.
Yeah, for sure. So, yeah, joining the team in April of 21 and with the intention of retail sales, owner occupants, that was going to be, what I was focusing on. But I had a little bit of a investment background. I had worked in like technical sales, business to business for about 21 years and was let go of that job right as COVID started. I was traveling, so traveled all over the country, mostly the West Coast. Couldn't really travel. I'd been there a long time, and it was, I was relieved of my duties. So I had about a year where I wasn't really doing anything. But at the time, my oldest son, Tyler, was working in wholesaling. So I started actually kind of learning a lot from him and about what he did and was just kind of helping him out and doing driving for dollars. If anybody knows what that is, it's driving around in various subdivisions looking for houses that have really tall grass or newspapers piled up on the driveway and mail overflowing in the mailbox, just looking for houses that look vacant and then going back and trying to search, find owners, contact information, putting a sticky note on the door in case anybody showed up. Hey, be interested in purchasing your house for cash, give me a call. We're kind of bird dogging for Tyler. And did a couple other things, sold home warranties in that time too, and that was soul sucking. And that's when I reached out to Jim Waymeyer, who had been my real estate agent, and said, I'm thinking about getting my real estate license, which I had had briefly in 1998 before I took that business to business job. And he's like, yeah, I'm on a great team. Let me know how I can help. And that kind of started that, got my license, joined the team. And after I joined the team and been there for a couple months, you had come to me and said, we've got this avenue for investor clients. We need somebody to kind of spearhead it for these out of town investors that are looking to invest in St. Louis. Asked me if I'd be interested, and I for sure was. And yeah, just kind of it took off from there and really allowed me to hit the ground running. I think a lot faster than I would have had I just been kind of slowly building that, you know, sphere of influence, owner occupant retail sales business. And then got into it and realized that in working with investors fit my personality really well because it's very black and white. It's very little emotion. The deal works or it doesn't work. And if it doesn't work, we go on to the next. And that really fit my personality. So yeah, it's been great. I do a handful of, owner occupants, friends, family, SOI. I've got an investor client who now we're closing on his sale of his former primary next week. And he bought his new primary about 6 weeks ago, I guess. So yeah, I mean, like I said, sprinkling some owner occupant retail sales in there, but yeah, the bread and butter is for sure the investing.
Got it. So when you first got into this, I know what you started doing on the investment space has somewhat shifted over the few years here as the market has evolved. Give us a little background on, what you were doing in 2021 and where you're at now and what you're
Yeah,
seeing kind of trending in the investment space right now.
yeah, it was definitely a shift. So 21, 22, and 23, primarily my business was multifamilies. You could go into South St. Louis in Dutchtown, Bevo, kind of B minus C neighborhoods and pick up four family buildings for the mid 200s to the low 300s that cash flowed really well. And you could do that all day long. So I had a lot of clients who were picking those buildings up, and that was primarily my main focus, what most of my clients were looking for, what I spent most of my time looking at. Then when interest rates started creeping up, what we were noticing was the building sellers were kind of slow to react and meet the buyers, maybe not midway, but meet them some way along the line to realize the money's more expensive now. I can't get this investment loan at 4.5% for your $300,000 building. Now that loan is 7.5%. And at some points, creeping up to 8%. So I can't, your building doesn't cash flow now, what my payment's going to be. And it felt like the sellers were slow to react and adjust their sale prices. So really had a lot of trouble putting deals together because just nothing would pencil out. So in the meantime, while that started to slow, started to pick up a few clients that were looking for midterm rentals. So pretty much a midterm and realistically anything over 30 days. Typically, these are 3 to 6 month rentals. We call them travel nurse rentals because it's primarily what they are in St. Louis, but really they can be anything. People in town for an extended stay for work for 2 months, or people that's had a tree fall on their house and they're displaced for 3 months while their house is being repaired. So anybody that needs a midterm 3 to 6 month rental. So a lot of my clients were buying those. They fully furnish them. You can get excellent rents for those. Um, and a lot of times it's not that tenant paying that out of their own pocket. So you can force the rents upwards quite a bit. So started doing more of those and started doing more primarily in 24. It started coming about, especially the back half of 24, Section 8 rentals. So I had not done much of that prior. And then about halfway through 24, kind of started shifting my focus, started coaching my investors a little bit, and then also was just getting newer investors that were figuring out that St. Louis is a really good spot for single family Section 8 rentals, and have really spent the last year primarily focused on that. Still do, still do a multifamily occasionally. Closed one last week in the Grove here, really nice building in a great area. But primarily this year, the focus has been on the single family Section 8 rentals, primarily up in North St. Louis County, areas like Glasgow Village, Berkeley, Florissant a little bit, Jennings, those areas where the houses are relatively cheap, but the rents are really, really strong in those areas. And you get to a place like Glasgow Village, it's kind of funny when I run my rental comps. Sometimes I'll put in an address, and I always start at a third mile, and I'll say, show me rental comps within a third mile of this address, and I'll get three or four. If I go to Glasgow Village, I might get 30 within a third mile. I mean, it is a rental hotspot, and it
Interrupt you real quick. That being said, does that mean it's going to be that much harder for me to get that house rented? So I'm going to buy this house and rent it out. Now I've got all these rentals, like it's that saturated. Is that a problem in your opinion?
right now conventional wisdom would tell you, wow, it's saturated. So to get my place rented, it's going to be super competitive. I'm going to have to drop my price. I'm not going to be able to get 1300. I'm going to have to drop to 1225 or whatever that number is to be able to make it attractive, just because it's so saturated. But it's not. Any of my buyers that have bought in that area are placing tenants, especially Section 8 tenants, almost immediately. I mean, they have options as a landlord. So they're not having to take, hey, I finally got somebody. They'll have five different vouchers come to them and they get to pick on which one's more attractive. There's
Do
just
you
so many.
have clients that have properties in those same areas that are not Section 8 but are sitting?
No, most of my people in those areas are Section 8, but even the ones that aren't are filling their vacants relatively quickly. I mean, now we're getting in the time of the year where it's just going to be slower. So, like, if you buy one now and you're trying to do a market tenant, you're probably not going to get as much as you would if this was spring or summer, because the rental market is pretty similar to, the owner occupant buying a house market. It's going to be a little slower in the winter. But
So,
yeah,
real
realistically,
quick, for
I
the
was just
investor who might be on the newer side, and then people, and our audience typically is there's other real estate agents out there, and maybe they haven't gotten to investing yet, but Section 8, everyone kind of refers to it, Section 8, uh, and you kind of generally know, okay, I think I know what that means, but for the people who don't, can you brief explanation of what it is you're referring to?
Sure. So it's basically through housing and urban development. St. Louis Housing Authority is who your direct contact would be. But if you wanted a house and you wanted to place a Section 8 tenant, you have the housing authority come over, and that's your first step, is that they inspect your house. And it's pretty similar to a standard occupancy inspection that you're going to have in most municipalities and in St. Louis County. Sometimes it can be a little more stringent. They're looking for a lot of safety items is what they're going to be looking for primarily. Obviously that everything works, stoves and refrigerators and furnaces and things like that. Obviously, those things have to work. But a lot of families that are, people that are moving into a 3-bedroom Section 8 subsidized house would probably have a family. It's very likely that they've got some younger kids. So they're making sure that places are safe. So you might have a house that has a detached one-car garage. It's not in the greatest shape, but it's there, but it's not really usable. That would probably pass an occupancy inspection, but a HUD inspection is probably going to make you do something with that garage because it's a
It's
potential safe.
more along the lines of more like maybe a building inspection when you're purchasing a house. Maybe not as invasive, but more so than your typical occupancy inspection, right?
Yeah, exactly right. And then when it comes to placing the tenants, how Section 8 works is they will dictate what the rent will be for your property, and then what portion of that rent that tenant will pay. So just say 1,300 a month. I have some clients that their tenant pays zero of that 1,300, that the entire 1,300 a month is subsidized.
And so
Close
then
what
to clarify, the city is paying that. The municipality who signed off on it, or who is paying for it? Government?
the government, yeah, essentially. Yeah, housing and urban development is paying their rent for them. So the reason so many people like Section 8 is because that's quote unquote guaranteed money. It's going to be there on time. You're not relying on that tenant to cut you that check or Venmo it to you or however they're paying you. That's coming on time every month from the government. Now, the
Any
tenant,
concerns with the government shutdown at the moment that you've heard of? I
so
haven't.
at this point, no, I've not heard any concerns about that. I mean, just my personal feeling, if this drags on much longer, I feel like more and more programs will need to be cut. I don't know if housing is going to be one of those. So, I hate to speculate. All I can say is, as of today, any of my Section 8 owners have not received any notification that, hey, your payments may cease, starting 12/1 or 1/1 or whatever that is.
Yeah, and I mean, I would imagine that's going to be one of the last things that would go if it had to, but that's not my space. But I was just curious, given current circumstances. So
Right. For sure. I mean, and it's something that, they've obviously asked me about. And, realistically, I know as much as any other layperson. I mean, I watch the news and I read the stories, but no one's going to reach out to me directly and say, hey, Chris, you know, starting December 1st, HUD's not covering these anymore.
sure.
I would just discover it like everybody else. But I would say if you're currently an owner of a Section 8 property, I would be reaching out to your local housing authority and asking them that question, because they're going to hear first. And if they've heard any inklings of anything coming down the line, I would reach out and find that out so you can start making preparations. Because, like I said, some of these, um, $1,200 a month rent, the tenant may not be paying any of that. So if those payments were to cease, that's your entire rent payment.
Well, there's risk, right? I mean, yes, it's guaranteed from the government, but there's also maybe not a guarantee, depending on how long the current. Maybe by the time this comes out, it'll be resolved and it'll be fine. Who
Right.
knows? But okay, well, I'm just looking for a little background on the Section 8 side just to be able to explain it. I want to kind of switch gears a little bit. So you've done multifamily, you've done some midterm rental. I know you personally have bought and flipped a couple houses. Obviously, you were doing a little bit of wholesaling, it sounded like, and then you're working on the single family rental side as well. If I'm thinking about investing in St. Louis, and I've never invested in St. Louis, I've never even bought an investment property. In your opinion, from all of those things, what would you do? What would you recommend somebody jump into and why?
If well, so if I'm a seasoned investor that has not bought in St. Louis, I think you have a multitude of options. If you're a relatively new investor, I like the single family. I like the Section 8 route. And the
Why do you
reason I
like the single family route? If I'm new,
so one thing to know about St. Louis, like I said, most of the multifamily deals that I've done have been in South St. Louis. South St. Louis is the oldest portion of the city. So the buildings are older. Um, you're talking anywhere from 80 to 90 to, if you get into the Soulard neighborhood, 130, 140, 150-year-old buildings. So that's where the majority of the multifamily buildings are. Now, when I'm looking for properties, I'm looking for things that have updated electrical and plumbing and fixtures and, heating, air conditioning, all the systems, things like that. So a lot of times when you're buying these buildings, you're buying the old shell, but all of the interior is basically newer. Sometimes that's 20 years old, sometimes it's 5 years old, sometimes it's 40 years old, but certainly not original. But with an older building is just inherently going to be some higher maintenance costs. So if I'm a newer investor, those kind of things I take into consideration. And I don't say this to scare people away, but I say this from experience where I've had some first time investors buy 100-year-old duplex or four family, and then they find out that the limestone foundation needs to be tuck pointed inside the basement, and that they buy something that's got old wood windows, and then they finally stop operating and you have to replace windows and things like that. So just the
you're just
expense.
running into a lot more maintenance, a lot more upkeep for these old buildings, right?
Yeah, that's exactly it. They mostly have flat roofs, and again, that doesn't mean you can't find one that's got the brand new roof and brand new windows and all that. They're out there for sure. We just have to be cognizant of everything when we're looking at those. Now, when you talk single families up in North County, now you're talking houses that on the old end are maybe built in the 20s and 30s, but primarily the things my clients have been buying are built in 50s, 60s, 70s. So your concrete foundation, occasionally a cinder block foundation, but mostly concrete foundations, electric panels that are updated, standard roofs, not flat roofs, things like that. Things that are just more modern to begin with, and therefore your day-to-day maintenance costs are less. And if you look at your cash flow per door, your purchase cost is so much cheaper on those single families. So you can buy a single family up there for 90 to 115 depending on how nice you want it to be or how nice it is when you buy it, whether it has a garage, so on and so forth. Um, and it's a very realistic possibility to cash flow 300 or $400 off of that one door, uh, if not more. When you get into South City and you get into the multifamily buildings, it's very, very rare to cash flow that much per door. So when I have investors that are dipping their toe into the St. Louis market, I like the single family first because now you're monetarily less invested as you're learning how the municipalities work and how the occupancy inspections work and how easy it is to place tenants and which property managers are good and which are not so good. And as you're learning all those things and what insurance rates are like, as you're learning all those things, you're not as monetarily invested. And so you can try that out and then start scaling from there. And I've had clients that have done that where they've done the handful of singles and then they're like, okay, this is working well.
graduate into that next level. Right?
Yeah, so let's
The other
go.
thing too is I think from an early on investor, you look at what you're saying, and I'm thinking about always exit strategy as well. So they get in, they buy a single family, it's going to be a little easier, a little faster sell, right? At least what we know here in St. Louis, than a multifamily. And again, it's really because of what you hit on, in that depending on what's happening in the rates, the market, like the multifamily space kind of stalled out for a while because the rates shifted around and numbers didn't make sense. So it makes it hard for people to want to buy them. Single families, people want them all the time, right? Whether they're buying for investment property or they need to live in them. So you can liquidate that most likely a little faster than you could the multifamily. So if they get in and they don't like it and they don't want to do it, unloading it, undoing it can be a little bit easier as well. It sounds like. Would you agree?
Yeah, for sure. Because, with every single family house, as long as it's, in relatively good condition, when you do need to go sell that, you not only have a pool of investor buyers, but you have a pool of owner occupant buyers. And when you're talking multifamily, yeah, there is the potential that, somebody could house hack a four family or a duplex. So you could potentially have an owner occupant buy a duplex or a four family, but the odds of that are pretty slim, and you've gotta have one of those units vacant for them to be allowed to do that. So, I just feel like your potential buyer pool when you go to sell that property is just gonna be so much larger, and the barrier to entry is so much lower that allows the next investor to buy your property as you're scaling up or doing whatever you're
Sure.
doing. 'Cause there just seems to be these properties go fast. That's what I, have to kind of coach my newer investors of. We can't get analysis paralysis on these. I'm not asking you to make a quick unwise decision, but if we think this is the one, let's go. Let's have your pre-approval. Let's go. We're going to have outs in the contract. We're going to do inspections. So you're not tied to this property if we get in there and everything's not as it seems, but we don't have a week to discuss it and reanalyze it and then reach out to the lender because these singles go fast.
So majority of your investors are out of state, right?
Correct.
So share with the audience what you do to help them make that decision quickly. I think this is helpful for potential investors that are thinking about St. Louis, and it's helpful for the agent audience that's listening too. That it's a great opportunity to generate more business for yourself and provide value in what it is you're doing out there as a realtor. And I think you do a lot more than the norm, from what I understand. And obviously, I'm biased; we work together, but I do think you provide a lot more, and you really have it laid out, which is why you've been able to do this so well for so long. So yeah, if you could share with us what that looks like.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think there's any question that I'm awesome. I think that's what you were getting at.
Yeah, yeah, I
So
didn't want your head to get bigger.
now I'll connect those dots for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Chris Awesome Lance, isn't that your middle name, right?
it is.
Yeah.
I had an interesting situation this week where he was just a call in to the team, and one of the teammates referred him to me. And I had been talking to him a little bit. He was interested in this 22 unit property, but he was also contacting the selling broker as well. And so I told him, I was like, hey, just go through me. I'll get everything arranged, and he was wanting to know if it was Section 8 approved and if there were any units to view, anything like that. So I'm in the process of doing that. And last Friday, he texted me and said, hey, I've got my ticket booked. I'm going to be there Tuesday to view that property. Can you go with me? And I'm like, yeah, I will be there. So we go, and it's not great. And he has no interest. He flew in from Los Angeles for a day trip. He landed at 1. We saw the property at 2. I drove him back to the airport for his flight at 6. So on the way back to the airport, I told him, I was like, man, this is what I do. If you had just told me to go check it out previously, I said, I didn't know you were coming until you were coming. But what I do is, so I set all my clients up on a search. I had myself set up on searches. So just in case if my client on their search, because occasionally that'll happen where something doesn't land in their search, but I'll see it, so I'll forward it to them. But as soon as we identify something that is going to work for them, I make the appointment and I go see it. So I'll go and I'll take video. My videos are usually 15 to 18 minutes long. So I take video of literally everything, all of the systems. I'm doing slow walks through the basement, checking for foundation cracks, getting ages of all the systems, trying to, get good video of the roof. And then also just examining the layout of the house. Is there a place for yeah, it's a 3-bedroom house, but there's nowhere to put a kitchen table. Where are these people going to eat? Things like that will affect your rent. And I've seen it happen, especially with HUD in Section 8, where they're like, well, we're not going to give you as much because there's not really anywhere for a family of 5 to sit here and eat a meal. So those are, I'm not only just looking at condition of the house, I'm looking at layout, rentability, and things like that. So I'll go walk the house. I'll upload that video to YouTube, send it to my client, and then if everything looks good, we submit the offer, then next would be inspections, and then I go to the inspections. So I'm my client's boots on the ground. Everything that a normal, real estate buyer would do if they were local and they were buying their house they're going to live in, they're going to go to inspections, they're going to view the house before they write the offer. That's what I'm doing. So I'll go to inspections because a lot of times, when you're with the inspector, there's a lot of off the record stuff that's not in the report that I want to be able to hear and ask questions about and ask about how severe this particular issue is. So the report goes back and then we discuss the report. So I'm basically eyes and ears. And if it's an occupied property, I always try to write in a walkthrough because typically what will happen on an occupied property is they say, no showings without an accepted contract. So I can't do that preliminary walkthrough video. So if we put it under contract, then I will always try to get within 3 days for me to do a preview before my client pays for inspections. Now, sometimes I
So you
get
do
put.
that. Have you been in a situation where you previewed and then you go, dude, let's get out of this, and then we bail and you save them money on inspections?
Yes, that happened earlier this year. That client actually ended up closing on a different property uh 2 weeks ago, sometime in October. But yeah, and it was great because the tenant was there. And those are always my favorite walkthroughs when I go and the tenant's there. Because as soon as I walked in, I was like, hey, and she's like, hi, let me tell you all the things that are wrong with this house. And I
Hey,
was
who
like,
needs to pay for a home inspection, right? You just ask the
right. I
tenant.
was like, say more, show me everything. And so we walked through. She's showing me everything that was wrong, the mold, the leaks, everything. And so I called my client and was like, this is not the one. We're going to send the mutual release because we had this contingency for me to view it before inspections and saved them a few $100 on the inspections they were going to spend. Now, occasionally I get the pushback where they're like, no, no, we don't want to disturb the tenant more than once. So your walkthrough is going to be during inspections. That's unfortunate. I get it. So sometimes that'll occur, but in an ideal situation, I'm walking that property before you're ever paying for an inspections, and I'm giving you a thumbs up, thumbs down that we're going to move forward with inspections.
Got it. So then, all right. So now you've located the property. You've went and walked it for them. You've seen it. You've done the inspections. We're good to go. Maybe you negotiate some repairs. That's pretty typical for a realtor. Okay, great. So now I'm buying it. What else do I need to be worried about? I mean, great. Thanks, Chris. See ya.
Right. So one of the first things I do, I have a canned email that I send to everybody when we speak for the first time. And it's got a list of, and this is a living document that changes and has changed several times. It's got local property managers, local insurance agents, local lenders, local handymen, local cleaners, all the boots on the ground you're going to need to run this property from 1,000 miles or 2,000 miles away or however far away you are. I'm
Can't
giving
I just
you.
manage it myself? I mean, it's just one single family. It can't be that bad, right?
That's what they think. Yeah. I mean, I've got clients that do that. And
So
I've
it's
got
not out of the
clients.
question. It's doable. I'm not
Yeah.
recommending it either. I'm just curious your feelings on it?
Yeah. I will say I don't recommend it for an out of town client just because even having a property manager is not set it and forget it. I mean, we call real estate investing passive income and things like that, mailbox money. You do have to manage your manager a little bit. And it's really, really helpful to have somebody here that's handling um, those calls when the toilet backs up or they've lost their key or whatever is going to happen, because they're going to happen. And you can have your boots on the ground handyman here that if they call and say, hey, my toilet's backed up, and then you have to call your plumber, here, but you're still getting that call. You're still very hands on. So again, it's usually typically 10% of your rental income is what property management companies charge. Some do it for 8. I mean, I just tell everybody expect it to be 10, and maybe you can negotiate that down. But realistically, it's worth the money to have that leverage here to handle those things. And then
So,
also, not only that, but eventually that tenant's going to move out and you're going to need to market that
mm,
rental for lease. And how are you going to do that? You're going to have to hire somebody here to show it. You're going to have to hire somebody, or you're going to do it yourself to vet the applications and do background checks and do all these things that a property manager is going to do for you. When things are going really smooth is when it feels like, man, I could be doing this myself. But when things start going a little bit, I don't want to say sideways, because it's just stuff that's going to happen. But when
just work needs
repairs,
to be done.
yeah, when work needs to be done, when you need to release that unit, that's where you're going to really wish, man, I wish I had somebody that I could just be like, oh, okay, tenant moved out, find me another one.
So you mentioned manage the manager. Share a little bit about what you mean by that.
Yeah, I mean,
Because I'm paying them 10%. Who's paying me to pay to then manage them? Why do I need to do that?
right, exactly. And I say that just because of experience. There's a lot of property managers in St. Louis. There should be less. There's several that are just not very good, and it's unfortunate. And that's why I say my document that I send people that says, here's my recommended property managers and handymen and insurance. I say that's a living document because people have been on that list and they've been yanked off that list. So I'm constantly vetting and listening to my clients. And as soon as I start hearing, hey, XYZ company that's managing, I don't know, I'm having trouble getting a hold of them. I don't know what's going on. I start reaching out to the manager, finding out what's going on. And then if we're not looking like we're coming to a solution, or if I'm hearing it from multiple clients, that's when I start making calls again and start putting the feelers out, talking to other agents in town. Who are you using for property management? Like, who would you use for your own buildings? Who do you use for your own buildings? Because I need that person. It's not I say manage the management. It's not a full-time thing, but again, I don't want to give the impression that you're going to buy this building, you're going to hire management, and all you're going to do is see that check every month and not have to be somewhat involved in the process.
I
You,
think
you,
from my experience, what you're really wanting to do in that case is letting them know that you're engaged, right? Looking at the monthly reports they send you, diving in and really looking at where the money went. What were the repairs? Did they notify you about the repairs? In some of these management agreements, it's like they have to ask you if it's over $500 or over 250, whatever that number is. And then there was an HVAC replacement. Did they tell you that they spent 5 grand and replaced it? No. Okay, well, that's something you probably want to have a conversation about. And why did it happen? And how come nobody told me? But that's, where I also think about, or what I also think about when I'm hearing manage the manager, just to let them know that you are engaged in your property and you do care. Because I do think if you're not doing those types of things and you're just checking every month, oh, I got some money, great, and keep going, who knows how well it's being managed or not, or where the money is really going. I hate to say all that, but that you got to inspect what you expect, right? And I think that's what you're doing. And the more you check in with them and let them know and ask questions and they know you're on it, I think the more then they're on your property and they're maintaining it. Whereas, because I've personally experienced this where I learned early on when we just like, these guys are great, I never hear from them. And then you find out like everything's a disaster and it's like, they weren't really doing anything because they didn't think I cared. So they didn't really care. They were collecting the monthly, management fee, but there wasn't a whole lot of managing going on there. And yeah, so that's great advice, Chris, in making sure that they're managing the manager. And really you're the asset manager, and just overseeing that, I guess. But then, so you were sharing like all the stuff that you do, this is why it's so important to have somebody in your corner, because you're covering a lot of these things and providing really good resources. Ballpark, how many of the people you worked with are repeat clients of yours? Put you on the spot. We didn't talk about this. So,
Yeah, I would say probably about 75% of what I did this year is a repeat client.
and the reason I'm asking you that and bringing that up is because all the things that you're doing for your clients is why they continue to come back to you, right? And the honesty that you're providing them when you walk through and are like, "Oh, this don't buy this building. This is bad." I love you haven't touched on this, but I know this because we work together. But your outlook is, if I'm going to help you buy this, what happens when you call me to sell it? And making sure that I can do that for you and making sure that what we're paying for it makes sense when it's time to sell it, or if you decide, hey, I don't want to invest anymore, or whatever it is. There's so many people, unfortunately, like property managers that are realtors that will just be like, yeah, no problem. Here you go. Thanks. And they don't see you because you're out of state. They don't care. They don't put in the time and effort, and your entire business livelihood is built around this. And it shows because 75% of your repeat business this year, right, is people you've already worked with, and that's important. And I'm wanting to just point that out because that is what separates you. That's why I said that earlier, that I know you do a lot more than what other people do, and that's why I wanted you to come on today and share this, because I think that's great, and the amount of due diligence that you're doing. And I think it creates confidence for those people that are in California or Seattle or wherever they are, that they know that they've got something in a good place here. And they're not like, I have no idea. Because personally, I own a lot of investor properties, but nothing out of state. And I don't have anybody like a Chris Lance in Tennessee to go buy real estate with, not that I want to, but I think that that's a huge piece that people get here when they get to work with you. So nice work. I appreciate you sharing all that. I'm curious, deal wise, everyone in investing, I feel like investing is cool because there's so many avenues. There's so many different things that we get to do: flipping, wholesaling, buying multifamilies, midterms, or Airbnb, like all the things, notes, like whatever. You've obviously experienced a lot of different things. What's, I don't know, tell us, can you share with us a deal that you put together recently that's maybe not normal, not a normal, just conventional type of deal that you've been able to put together and get a little more creative on?
Yeah, there's been a couple actually. So I've got one that doesn't officially close until January 30th, but essentially my buyer is running the building and is in the process of renovating units as we speak.
But he doesn't own it yet. He hasn't actually closed on it.
He is not closed on it because he's leasing it. He has a lease option that began on September 30th.
What kind of building is it?
So it's a 16 unit building in Tower Grove East neighborhood. So the seller was a client of mine, or is a client of mine, and I helped her buy this a few years ago. Unfortunately, her partner that she bought it with passed away, and she's been tasked with handling everything to do with this building. She lives on the West Coast. So it was just a lot. So she had brought it out to me and was like, "Hey, if you think you could find a buyer for my building, I would be willing to let it go at a good number, at a number that works." So I have another great client out of Washington State who's always looking for a creative deal. So we started talking about it, and I will say this was his brainchild. So I can help, but yeah, don't come to me and be like, "Chris, put together a really complicated creative deal on how I can pull this building down." I can
Yeah, but
help a
you can
little.
poke holes in it. You know enough to know, like,
Yeah,
maybe that would work.
exactly. But when my client brought this to me, I was like, "Oh, this is kind of fascinating." But essentially, on I guess pre-closing date in September, gave us a substantial down payment, and then had it written into the contract that as of that date, he would take over all responsibilities of the building, all the maintenance, paying for the property manager, everything to do with that building, he takes on from day one. He also collects the rents. Now, the seller, the only thing she still has is her original note, which will be until actual closing date. So he is now will be getting his permanent financing by January 3rd. But what this time period does is let him build value in the building between September 30th and January 30th, which is why he's over there now. He's redone the laundry facility down in the basement. He's renovating, I think, two or three of the units that were vacant. literally had that in the contract that seller need not worry about turning units A, B, and C. Buyer will do that. So
So is
now
he
he's turning
paying
them.
a monthly rent essentially for the entire building then?
Right. So he's paying her basically a lease payment, which is a certain amount that covers her mortgage payment plus some. So she's making a little mailbox money and getting her mortgage covered. And then we'll officially close it in January. And I don't have it in front of me, I should have pulled it up, but there's also a seller finance piece that will run through June. So it's about a 9-month closing period. So the seller finance piece will be post closing, but it is a very, very interesting deal.
So the wins here are the seller is no longer maintaining, doing anything with the property. They don't have to pay the taxes come December, right? They're not worrying about insurance. All they're doing is just paying the monthly mortgage payment, and the new owner has inherited everything. The new owner has to, well, do they get their own insurance, or is that just part of it's still insured? They're just paying for it through the seller.
So it's still insured because it's through the original note. So that insurance is still on it.
Okay.
So he's essentially managing the building more or less. It's a almost like subletting a 16 unit building
Yeah,
or
which is wild.
arbitrage.
Like, normally you would hear about that in a single family,
Right.
like, I'm gonna lease your house and then pay it back to you, and then it pays you more on rent, and then you cover it's exactly like what I know of as a single family, but this guy's doing it with entire 16 units, and then he has full access to whatever. So his plus side is that he can go in and update and increase values right away. So then when he goes and finances it, in theory, then it's worth more than what he was already buying it for. Is that right?
Correct.
And then I guess, okay, so this is awesome. What's the negatives? What happens if he doesn't close? I guess that's my first thought, right?
So if he doesn't close, and that's what I discussed with the seller, I said, well, and I was thinking about this the other day. If he doesn't close, she gets the building back, which ideally is not what she wants, but she's going to get a building back that is much better than she had when this deal came to fruition because he's over there actively upgrading the building. He's literally, and I
And
mean,
her mortgage still got paid down and she still made some money and she didn't have to do anything.
exactly. And he's not just turning those vacant units, he's completely remodeling them and changing the floor plan. He completely redid, they had some coin op laundry in the basement. He redid that whole room, put in folding tables, and now is putting in washers and dryers that are key card operated and things like that. So
So
he's
what is his new places, what's he going to rent those new ones for versus what it's renting for now? Do you know, like a few $100s more increase?
yeah, um like the two bedroom, I think his target is 250 or $300 a month more than what it was getting. I
That's
mean,
great.
it's a really nice building and a really good area. It's just a tired building. It really hasn't been freshened up in 20 something years. And he sees the potential of where it's at because so he's an out of town client. He was just here, he was just in town this week. He's an out of town client that spends a lot of time here. And so he's getting to know the areas and he drives around and he realizes the potential for this building, which is why he started asking me about it a year and a half ago of, do you think that person would ever be willing to sell? And I was like, well, let me see what we can do. So it's taken a while to get to this point for both sides to agree, but he sees the value in the neighborhood and is willing to make the capital investment. And like I said, and that's kind of what I told my seller client is he's investing a lot of capital to turn this building and make a lot of upgrades. Clearly, he intends to close, but if he doesn't, you're going to receive back a building much better than you had 6 months ago.
It's really a win-win. It gives both sides the benefits they're looking for. So that's really neat. We're about short on time. Just curious before we wrap. I know last time you were on, I always asked, what's the funniest thing you've ever come across? But so I want to ask it the same way. And I know in investing and going into a lot of vacant houses, interesting parts of town, you always have some crazy stories. So Before we end today, can you share with us a brief story that's maybe PG-13 related?
Yeah, and the last time when we were all on, I had forgotten a story that was probably the most embarrassing was when I got locked in a house, which doesn't happen often, but very, very, very tricky old front door that I had a lot of trouble getting in. But when I finally made it in and realized, oh, I forgot my flashlight and went to go back out, I could not get the knob to work. So I thought, well, I'll just go out the back door. Well, the back door had a little addition sunroom on the back, but no steps down to the ground, and wasn't a huge jump. It was probably like 6 feet, but I'm not as young as I used to be. So I went back to the front door and thought, I don't want to make that jump. I'm going to go back here. And so, literally, after about 10 minutes of trying the door, because then also I thought, I have to get back up the way I jumped down. And that was the scariest part of I can make the 6 feet jump down. Can I pull my old ass back up to get back in this house to finish my walkthrough? So that's what I had to do. I jumped down, went got my flashlight, and then had to go and crawl back up into the sun porch area and get back into the house. And literally went back to the front door and it popped right open. So
Hopefully the neighbors got a good video of you, scaling the side of the house to get back into it.
there's no way what I was doing looked legit at all. I can't believe somebody didn't call the police on me because it had to look like some knucklehead trying to break into this house. But I was just trying to break out of it.
That's really funny. I don't know that I've ever heard of anybody get locked in the house as a realtor who has the key.
It can't happen often. And then the other side of that is some of the scary stuff, which like happened this week. I've got a client that's getting ready to list a 4 family in South City, and it's got a vacant unit, and the PM cleaned it. This is something else I do for my clients. And he's going to place a tenant after it was cleaned. And I said, well, let me go check it out, because before you place the tenant, we want to go in and take pictures of that vacant unit before a tenant gets in there. So we have some pictures of a unit when we list it on the MLS. So I'll go down and check how clean it is. And he's like, I said, get me the unit number and the door code. He's like, great, here's the door code. It's the second floor door on the left. Perfect. I go in, I punch the code, I go walk up the stairs, and as soon as I get to the top of the stairs, clearly I'm in someone's apartment. There's dishes in the sink and furniture and everything. It was the second floor door on the right is where I should have been. So now this had a fine ending because I got the hell out of there. Nobody was home, and then got into the correct unit. But that's not the first time that I've been told a place was vacant and then I've walked in and there's been, luckily this time there was no people. The last time there was people, and some poor lady was staring at me with her eyes this wide, and I'm sure mine were too. And I'm like, I was told this was vacant. And she said, well, we just moved in. I said, well, okay, well, I don't know what to do. So I'm just going to get out of here.
But clearly this isn't vacant. Yeah.
Right. So that, and that door didn't want to open, and I had to shoulder it open. So I clearly again sounded like a crazy person trying to break into this apartment, and then did. And the lady was literally in a wheelchair in her living room staring at me, waiting for the worst. And luckily I wasn't there to do any harm. She was not holding a 12 gauge. And we had a good laugh and I got the hell out of there. But it can be a little sketchy sometimes. So
Yes, things to be aware of.
yeah.
Well, hopefully our listeners got some value out of this call today. I think you shared a lot of great nuggets around investing and Section 8 specifically, and just what you do for your clients and how amazing that is. And if you're an agent out there, I think that's a great opportunity to generate more business in this space. So thanks for sharing all that. If anybody is interested in investing in real estate in St. Louis and wants to get a hold of you, or other agents are just curious and want to learn more about your processes and whatnot, how do people find you, Chris?
Yeah, just feel free to give me a call, 636-233-3909, or shoot me an email, chris@nations-network.com. I'm on Facebook, and I would say I'm on Instagram and the other stuff, and I am, but I have no idea what my handles are. I'm just there. So,
Just call or text or email Chris is really
right.
what he's.
Yeah.
So, no, it's perfect. We'll put that in the notes as well. So, Chris, appreciate your time. And this will conclude another great episode of Realty Resilience. Appreciate everyone out there listening to another episode, and staying tuned for our next one in a few weeks. Thank you. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Realty Resilience. Be sure to join our free Realty Resilience Facebook group where real estate professionals connect, share strategies, and access resources. You can also follow us on Instagram, like us on Facebook, or subscribe to our YouTube channel for more insights. And remember, we release new episodes every 2 weeks. See you next time.